Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you keep on saying that?
I don't know, man. It's a Kenyan thing. Yeah.
I don't say yeah.
You do.
I do.
Yeah, everyone.
In this time we've been together, you've heard me say yeah.
I haven't kept a record, but you will say yeah.
You think so?
Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm not going to say yeah. Let's just see how. No. We are using it as the subject of our conversation. I'll be saying yes.
Sawa, boss. Sawa.
So what's up, man?
I'm good, man.
Good, man. Good.
Yeah. Guys, this is year number, I don't know, 20 what? Depending on when I upload it. But man, I'm with a really good friend of mine, a brother. This guy has mentored me since I was younger. So most of the good things are his fault.
So you're just telling them how old I am now?
Yeah, the beard looks younger. Yeah,
all right, man.
When you hit those numbers,
yes,
please don't dye your hair.
Yeah,
keep it.
I said it. Okay, from now on, I would say yeah. Okay.
This is yeah talk, conversations, real conversations about all sorts of things, leadership. Thank you for watching the one, the previous one.
Subscribe.
Subscribe. I'm sending money and just now. So yeah, thank you for watching those. Thank you for, I know the previous one was long, but come back to it. Like, you don't need to watch it one sitting.
That's the beauty of online.
Yeah.
Pause and then
come back
like, again. Yeah,
you're free to pause, come back, ni. So straight on to it. Pastor Gowi.
Yeah.
How? Like, where were you born? Where were you raised? What kind of family do you come from?
Also, the question is that, like, where was I born?
Like, this is an African show, man.
Do you know, if it's an African show, it says, where were you born? They say there's something wrong. You're like, the kid did something. Where was this kid born?
Yeah.
Well, I was born in Nairobi. Nairobi Hospital.
Hey.
Yeah, that's where I was born. I'm the last born of 3 kids. Of overachievers. My 2 older siblings are overachievers. I mean, I grew up not with low self-esteem, but saying, my gosh, they're always having certificates. Yeah, a certificate for this, certificate for... I mean, I was in those kids who had certificates.
You had
experiences. You know, my medals. I was like, hey, Mase, they are number 1, number 2. My sister was like, and still is an athlete. You know, and so she was like number 1, number 2 in sports and stuff. My bro was the same. And then he's like so smart. That guy is like wisdom.
He is just wisdom.
My brother, you just see wisdom and the dictionary. He's like, his face is there. You don't need a definition, man. He's so smart. And then my sis, man, oh my gosh, she has a heart that's bigger than the world.
Really, that actually is true.
She has such a big heart. Now, wisdom and heart together. And that I grew under that.
That's awesome. And, and your parents, are they also from Nairobi?
Yeah. My parents are not born in Nairobi. They're from the lakeside.
From the lakeside.
That's where my parents are from. Yeah. My dad is from a place called Urima Village.
Urima. I've been there.
You've been there, eh? And there's a beach right there, right? Yeah, on the Lake Victoria. Guys don't believe there are beaches on the Lake Victoria.
There's a beach. It's awesome. Awesome.
But my pops passed about 2 years ago. Another wise guy. Maybe that's where my brother also got that wisdom. And my mom is from Nyakach. Yeah.
So Nyakach is
okay. There I said it. Yeah. All right, it's done. No more.
So your dad is no longer with us.
Yes.
Only about that.
It's so cool. It's cool, man.
I was privileged to hang out with him for a bit, and he just. I feel like that brief interaction changed.
It's cool, man.
It changed.
Now imagine all those years with this guy.
Man, such lucky guys. And then you guys are musical. Like
our family.
Your family is musical. How? Why?
I'll take it because of where we're exposed. You know, I think in many ways, people say there's talent, but I dare say a lot of the talented people we see is because it was the environment that enabled them. And so, of course, there's the place of you being rhythmic, or you're not tone deaf or something of that sort. And so my father was a lover of jazz.
So who do you listen to?
You really want to?
Yeah.
Michael Williams, Mr. Piano, Dave Brubeck. He watched Dave Brubeck. Now, if you guys know who Dave Brubeck is, okay, he's the guy who did Take Five.
Take Five.
Yes. How does that thing go?
What was it? Is it Tusker that did that?
Yeah, it was Tusker.
Sportsman.
And I think they Anyway.
Yeah.
Then John Coltrane, he's watched them. Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis. You know, Yani, my dad watched these guys.
Why is that?
When he went to school in the US and lived in the US.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he lived in the US. Was he part of?
He was part of that airlift, the Tomboya airlift, the first one. He was part of it.
What's a Tomboya airlift?
It's where Tomboya airlift in there.
So that's
no. Let me explain. All right, to guys who don't know the history of our country. As Kenya was at the cusp of independence, and right from there, what our fathers at that time were looking and saying, look, if we're going to attain independence, we need to have a cohort or a group of people who know how to manage what we call a bureaucracy. And so in his wisdom, Tomboya's wisdom, and in his connections, now said, why don't we expose people? Now, come to think of it, people like Tomboy and my father were around the same age.
Oh, and that, what age was that when they were leaders?
This was like in their late 20s and 30s. These were in their 30s, okay? And so what they did was find Kenyans from all over the country, and get them an education. And so they put up these things, and so people from different parts of the country applied for these things and got in. And so they were the first, I think, were around 50, and my dad was the 50th person.
No way.
Yes, and he wasn't part of the initial people who went through it. The long story of the short thing, he was actually the 50th person, but he had to pay for his flight.
Oh, why was that?
Because the 50th person dropped out. So when that 50th person dropped out, my father got to know about it, so he got onto that.
Got you.
All right.
Yeah.
My mom too also went to the US and got her education there.
Right.
And so we if there's a place, of a family, we are a family that are privileged to be able to be exposed globally.
Got you.
And so we were born into that. And so my mom was a lady of classics.
Yeah, no wonder, man.
Okay,
Such
so
a
the
wonderful
classics.
mom,
the classics and opera. I should go to the opera, man, and she'd be like the only black person in opera. Our cousins who are actually had a band at that time, and they had all these instruments. And when we used to go and visit them, we were like those bad toys.
Sure, guys, we mess everything.
We mess everything. So there's like you guys. Pete, Gowi, and Archie are coming.
Hide
everything. Yeah, these kids are terror. But the only place they couldn't lock was a garage. And that's where this guy's music band was. Okay? And so the only way these people could keep, my aunt and my uncle could keep us from destroying this was teach us how to play. So my sister got the piano. My brother was like all the instruments, and I was on the drums. And then we would sing. So at home, we would mimic what our cousins would do. So we'd go for their practices. My aunt and my uncle and their band. We'd go for their practices. We'd go for their gigs, and stuff. I thought, we're kids, barely, 7, 8 years old. But these are the things we were exposed to. And then because we're also in church, and as we started getting our preteens and stuff, that's where we started getting the opportunities. And the church, Nairobi Baptist Church, where we used to go to, exposed us now to bigger things. And that
You were part of a group called Triumph.
Yep.
A Kenyan group.
Yes, gospel group called Triumph.
Yeah, yes. I remember that. Did a video for his dad's memorial, and I link that somewhere.
Man, it was a nice video.
Yeah.
It was a tearjerker. Don't do that to me ever again, man. I mean, to talk about my father is like to talk about it, because it is his experience that influenced who we all are. Because of that exposure and all that, you'd expect that now us guys would be like rolling with the Benjis.
Yeah.
But we didn't, man. In fact, we got the wrong end of the stick. My father was part of that first and what we now know as the second liberation of our country. Because of my father's understanding political leading, seeing what the colonial government was doing at that time, he had the opportunity of going to school and advancing past primary school, and went to Maseno School. I mean, he calls that the Maseno School.
The Maseno School.
Yeah, even on in his hospital bed before he died, you know, he'd go and ask, who are you? Where did you go to school? It's not like the Maseno School. And so that generation was, I mean, education was like the emancipation. You know, it changed your life completely, and it did. It exposed my father to the rot and the lies of the colonial government. But check this out, and the lies of the church. And he saw how the church aided colonialism to oppress and do, and so I was like doing that. So it was very hard to even tell my dad about Christ in itself. But I mean, he later came around, you know, and did it. But in that, he began being exposed to what was going on, especially during the 50s. And that's when he met Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And that changed his life. This was in the early 50s, and totally just changed his life. And from there, he would follow Jaramogi Odinga around the country. He would go with him even to Uganda on those times to figure out, you know, what is this guy saying? And he'd go and meet the Kenyan diaspora there at Makerere and stuff like that. So my father did not have the opportunity to go to university like we would have now. You know, when you finished high school, you'd go. So, you know, you have odd jobs here and there. But you'd be under the tutelage of this guy. People like J.D. Kali. These are the people he was meeting. Pinto Gama, Pinto. These are people he was being exposed to then. And that's how he was brought into that. And he got the opportunity to go and study. When he came back to Kenya, one of the things was, this was the educated generation. People like Titus Mbathi, Wangare Maathai. These were some of the people who were part of the airlift. Even CK, Chris Kirubi.
Wow.
You know, people, but then they were at the tail end. Coming back to Kenya, being part of that, he joined the civil service. He was a DO,
a district officer,
out in Kapenguria. And in fact, he told me a story that one day there was a strike in I think it was Kitale High or something of that sort. And you know who the ringleader was? Kijana wa Malwa.
Wow.
And those days when you're going to be expelled, the DO had to sign the thing. And he actually he told me this story that he did not sign the thing. He says, this is a leader. You just need to do this. And those white teachers didn't know how to handle dissent from young men at that time. And so Kijana wa Malwa, one of our vice presidents at that time, was a youth wing leader. But nevertheless, those are the things he did. He says on the day of independence, he was the one who raised the flag out in Kapenguria.
Oh, wow.
Yes. You know the way they're different places. So they were raising the Kenyan flag, and so he had the privilege of doing that. And then he moved to work in the Rift Valley. Get this. He was the personal assistant and speech writer to Daniel Arap Moi.
No way.
Who at that time, in the way it was is like today, he was the president of the Assembly of Rift Valley. Something of that sort. You know, now we have 42 of them, but now the Rift Valley had that. So he was his assistant in that. And then he got bored of Gava, because Gava wasn't paying much. He wanted to get married and stuff like this. And he got another fellowship to go back to the US. And around that time, he got hooked up with my mom, and that's where they became husband and wife.
Wow.
Then they went back to the US. When he came back, that time is now when Jaramogi Odinga fell out with Kenyatta. And that's where, at that time, the whole idea was the KANU government had fought for 4 things.
Right.
For the land, to eradicate poverty, ignorance, and disease. But when we got into that, these were the idealists. At that time, it wasn't tribes. It was ideas.
Really?
I mean, if you read some of those memoirs, man, it's like, they were not talking about tribes. It was, I mean, philosophy. There was this camp with the Tom Mboya, and they had another ideal. There was another camp with Odinga, and then you read Pio Gama Pintos and J.D. Callis, the things they were writing at that time. And then when you read those memoirs, see, these were philosophical differences that they had at that time.
Right.
And so my father wasn't left-leaning, but he was more centrist.
Got it.
To lack of that. And so, anyway, to cut a long story short, again, they can read that, the book, they'll know more. My dad, out of principle, decided, we can't be in this. And so he supported the camp that Jaramogi was leading. And many of them were put in prison. They were political prisoners. They were separated from the general population. And this is why they were separated. Because they were intellectuals, they could influence the general population in Kamiti, in Kamiti, in Naivasha, in Kingongo.
They were sort of enlightened by quote-unquote Western education, right? But they were Africans who were aspired to a certain ideal.
Yep.
So there's some sort of, for lack of a better word, dissonance in there, because you've been brought up in what is like as traditional African as it is.
I call them the transition generation for Africa, because this was not just happening here in Kenya. All over Africa, there were those who were part of the independence movement, and those who were in office betrayed the independence movement. And those are the people who had the brunt, people like Patrice Lumumba. Okay, he was part of that in at that time the Congo. I'm trying to remember other names. Names are not coming up right now, but these are people, generations that were part of that, but then the system spat them out. And because the independence movement seemed to be aborted. And so why we are where we are today as a country is because these guys were not patient enough to work with the fundamentals. Today, we are coming into an electioneering period now. If you look at it, some of the challenges we're dealing with today
are the same
challenges that they have 45, 50 years ago, because the fun. And so through my childhood, my father would be arrested in and out. My mom would try to, in the whole thing, my mom is actually the hero, because somehow she held our family together with all this crap that was happening around. That thing was crazy. I mean, just think about the stress that my mom would go through.
I can imagine.
Trying to raise us with a husband who is in jail. And those days, you are like, no go zone. People would not want to associate with you.
It's I think the president alluded to this a while ago. The women were actually the heroes at some point in our country. So he talked about his mom, and then now you talk about your mom.
Absolutely.
And there's the wives of the Mau Mau fighters, and some of the women who are actually fighters
right in themselves. So my mom is part of the first, especially the second liberation of our country. By the time we were seeing that Yote Yawezekana in 2002, the people were celebrating with all these guys. But what about, Mwite's family? What about Shikuku's family? What about Matiba's family? What about, and these are now the people we see. What about Ida Odinga and her children? Those are the people to be celebrated, because they're the ones who carried the pressure and the stress.
Right.
Not that these are the people who are in and out. Koigi's family and we saw a small snippet about it with Koigi's family. And the mother, in her desperation, called other women to go and pray at Freedom Corner. And you saw what the government did to them. People. Here's one thing, maybe as we move on to this conversation, that I will tell you. My father said, freedom fighters, which he considered himself one, or these people are liberations, should never be compensated for what they do. I'm like, why not? He says, because when you're fighting for freedom and for liberation, you should never be compensated. In fact, you should never look for any celebration or anything. It's generations who later should celebrate you. And I told him, this is an old man who's being defeatist because you have him. He said, no. Because we used to have candid conversations with him. He says, once you're paid for being a liberator and a freedom fighter, you become a mercenary.
That's like a boom. Say that in a different way.
All right.
Say that.
If I am fighting for freedom or liberation, and I want to be recognized for that, all right, then I no longer am fighting for freedoms and liberation. I am just fighting so that I can be paid in some way. That's what mercenaries are. Mercenaries come and do work for you.
Yeah.
Okay?
For the pay.
For the pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful.
And he told me, Gowi, it is your children that will be celebrating us. Those are the people who will be celebrating. Now, those are the liberators.
And I heard him say that. And I think, I don't know that this would make it to the tape, but he talked a little bit about the differences between the Luo community and the Kikuyu community. And he said why...
he explained that to you.
He explained it to me. And he said... he basically broke down why the Luo community leaned towards socialist ideology, why the Kikuyu community leaned towards capitalism in quotes. And he said, the basis of it is how the Luo community looks at things like land is that it's communal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not like the Kukes like us who you want your stake. Yeah.
But it is not out of selfishness.
Yeah.
But for the Kikuyu, it is out of your inheritance.
Yes.
Because it is from the value of your land that you get your identity.
Right.
That's for the Kikuyus.
Yeah.
Whereas for the Luos, it is communal.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're always... So, like, my children are not mine.
Yeah.
They belong to the clan.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
the community.
And I think part of understanding some of our divisions is understanding those things as different perspectives. And that's what they are. They are just different
perspectives,
you know?
Right.
So yeah, and I think that generation, he talked about him accepting Jesus. I think it was very hard for them to accept Christianity as it came.
Because it came with the oppression of colonialism.
Exactly. And I think it was used as there are some guys, of course, who had good intentions, but by and large, most of them used it to come and take our land, you know. And a friend of mine tells me about how there was a truck. They lived in what were they called? The villages. They were like concentration camps, right? And the truck that would pick up the bodies or bring the Mau Mau bodies had a memory verse on it. So you're just like, how do you accept Christianity when you can see the nonsense that it's come with?
Yeah.
And
I don't know if it was I can't remember who said this in history books, is that the missionaries came, gave us the Bible, and we told us to pray. When we opened our eyes, we were left with the Bible, and they left with our lives.
Yeah. And someone, I think there's a lot to read about that, but I digress.
Mungu wa huruma, ibarikie Afrika ino.